When I was young, me and my family moved into a pretty old house in England, and it was in pretty bad condition when we moved in, so we had to do some renovations. I had to share a room with my mother, and this is where I would experience most of the ghost stuff. As you came into the room, this is what it would look like. On the left is a wall, and on the right was my little bed. Hugging the left was my mother's bed and a small nightstand. This all took place over the course of about 7 years. Anyways, now on to the story. It started off slow, such as me and my siblings seeing something at the corner of our eyes while we would play board games late at night, or just feel like we were being watched. Eventually, it evolved into actually seeing stuff often. Although I shared a room with my mother, I would keep all of my toys and stuff in my brother's room. We would often be there late at night, playing or talking. Every time I would leave the room, the exact same toy would come launching off the shelf and land at my feet. My parents were big believers in the paranormal, so they would tell us to ignore it and pay it no attention. But us being kids, we never listened. From there, it would get worse and worse, and it seemed to target me. This is the part that freaked me out the most. One night, I was asleep in my mother's room as usual, when suddenly I woke up and was sitting up. I opened my eyes, and through the little light in the room, I could see a short figure standing by my mother's nightstand and hunched over staring at her. I didn't have time to pay attention to details, since I immediately started screaming and crying. It was so loud, my mother thought I was being murdered as soon as she woke up. The figure disappeared, and she calmed me down and put me back to bed. I thought it was over, but really, it was just the beginning. From that point on, it would be nearly a nightly routine, at least 4 nights a week. I would wake up in the middle of the night, sit up, and look over to my mom's nightstand and see the exact same thing. Some sort of figure standing over my mother, and again, I would scream, cry, and so on. Sometimes my mother would leave a little light turned on for me on her nightstand, but that didn't help as the figure would still come back after each night. Eventually, I managed to identify what it was. It was a little girl with blonde hair in a dark blue dress with light blue patterns and flowers on it. Even though I could tell what I was looking at, it still terrified me, and I would scream and cry nearly every night. Sometimes it would be in a different spot, instead of next to the nightstand, such as standing by the door looking at me instead of my mother, and sometimes closer to my bed. Eventually, my mother got tired of me waking her up by screaming and crying, and she eventually went to see a psychic. This part was absolutely crazy. She described what was happening to us every night to the psychic, and the psychic told my mother that it's a little girl called Samantha, and that she had been following my mother since she was a child and acts as a guardian angel of sorts. That's why she was always watching over my mother as she slept. The psychic also drew an image of the little girl, which my mother showed me once she came home. I immediately started bawling because it was the exact same girl. We have since moved out of that house, and I no longer live with my mother, but I have plenty more experiences in that house and in others I've lived in. I was home alone one evening and had gone to sleep for the night. I live with my significant other and 2 indoor cats, but she was out of state traveling for business. I woke up in the middle of the night. I wasn't sure what time it was, but it was completely dark out. I like it when it's cool when I sleep, and usually have the temperature around 7 degrees or colder since I live in central Texas. But this was different. I was ice cold and wrapped in blankets. It was middle of summer, so evenings aren't cold. When I grabbed my phone to look at the time, it seemed to be off, and I pressed the on button, but it never turned on. Since I was half asleep, I shrugged this off. I walked out of my bedroom to go adjust the thermostat, and noticed the cats weren't around. This was weird because the fur balls are always hanging out in or around the bed. I walked to the thermostat and tried to adjust it, but the power to my Nest thermostat was nil, and the power to the house seemed to be off. I peeked out of the upstairs window to see if any of my neighbors were having power issues, and I noticed that all of the outdoor lights were working just fine. From the time I woke up to this moment was probably around 1 to 2 minutes max. I decided to wander downstairs to grab some water, but I'm startled when I realize there's a glow of a light coming from the first floor. The way my house is situated, I couldn't see the light until I had approached the stairs. I found this odd because the power seemed to be out just upstairs, which didn't make a lot of sense. I started walking down the stairs and began to hear a faint humming noise. The noise had a high pitch to it, with arbitrary pulses of low sounds. Almost like a muffled weed whacker that someone is throttling at random. As I continued to walk down the stairs, I spotted a dark, slowly moving figure in the room with the light at the bottom of the stairs. The next step that I take feels like I walked off the side of a cliff or was sucked into the floor. That is really the best way I can explain it, because I don't remember what happened after that moment. I just lost all feeling from my body. My next memory is waking up to the sound of my phone's alarm. Everything seemed back to normal. I sat there in bed. The cats were back to being lazy in the bed next to me. And I tried to think about the 2-minute incident that happened in the middle of the night. I am not a sleepwalker, and I was definitely not dreaming. My security systems app shows the time whenever a door is opened or closed. I realized that my security system was disarmed on the app, and that the front door had been opened and closed several times throughout the night. I pulled up my security footage from the exterior cameras and was surprised to learn that there was zero footage from the night. All it was the motion sensors reacting to a random car driving by around 10 p.m. And then the next thing is another random car in the morning. So someone or something had walked in and out of my front door, but the cameras didn't capture any footage. My neighbor across the street has a good security system that points at my house. I asked if he could review the footage from his cameras. I told him some made-up story about how I thought someone had broken into my truck. He said it was weird because when he tried pulling up the footage from that night, his cameras also didn't record anything, just a time gap once again. My first thought is that I was sleepwalking and that the memory was a dream, but it couldn't have been. When I looked out the window in the middle of the night, I distinctly recall a red pickup truck being parked in the wrong direction in front of my neighbor's house. I always notice when cars are parked left wheel to the curb because I've gotten a ticket for this in the past. However, the truck was not there before I went to sleep, based on footage. But there it was in the morning, again based on footage. So the truck was there when I saw it in the middle of the night, so I definitely woke up in the middle of the night. Cold as ice, no cats, no working phone, or thermostat. I know I saw the truck out the window, and then got warped by something on the stairs. A couple additional things were different in the house. The security system was disarmed, and I definitely armed it before bed. The light was still on downstairs, and that was absolutely off before I went to bed. And lastly, the biggest mystery in my opinion, my 55-gallon fish tank that sits at the bottom of the stairs in the entryway was missing 2/3 of the water. Seriously, where did over 40 gallons of water go? The whole area around the tank was bone dry and the fish were fine. This is going back years. I work in a hospital, and we were having the A&E X-ray department refurbished. So they needed a porter on nights, just specifically to escort patients from A&E to main X-ray and back. It was easy money, so I volunteered. It's my first night working the night shift, and I'm on with the department manager and a guy that's just under her. They're both in their late 40s and early 50s. So as the night goes on, it gets to 12:30 a.m., and I ask if I can go for my lunch, and they agree. I grab the key to unlock the doors leading down to the ultrasound room, because that's where the break room is. I locked the doors from the inside to stop any roamers going where they shouldn't. I'm now sitting, reading a book, and I see the shape of a person walk past the frosted glass. Then, it punches the door as hard as it can and rattles the door frame. I jumped out of my skin. Immediately, I go to check, and after walking around the department, there's no one else there, and it's still locked from the inside. I have the only key. I go and tell the manager about it, and she asks the other guy if he was playing a prank. He was adamant he wasn't. He was doing his uni work. So we had gone and checked the security footage. You can clearly see me walking down the corridor, locking the door, and going into the staff room. Then, 45 minutes later, me coming out and looking around. I found out that the X-ray department is an old mortuary. I don't really believe in ghosts, ghouls, and etc., but I definitely saw something. If you're familiar with Denver area, I lived in the Clayton neighborhood on York. As with all millennials, the rental market crippled me, and I had to find a place with charm, aka a 1920s brick duplex with 1970s updates in the year of our Lord, 2022. But as a recently divorced dad with 50-50 custody, my bank account dictated my residence. To give you a sense of the space, it was a shotgun-adjacent style home. 900 square feet upstairs with an unfinished basement that was really only used for laundry and housing spiders. My daughter and I had rooms on either end of a 10-foot narrow hallway with the world's smallest full bathroom splitting the distance. For the first few months, it was just an old house on a busy street. Fire trucks, ambulances, and cop cars flew down the street each night. So much so that I had to get blackout curtains, or my room would look like a knockoff disco of flashing lights. My daughter was 5 at the time, and it was a hard time adjusting to living in 2 houses. She'd frequently climb into my bed halfway through the night because something had awoken her and she was scared. I would feel her crawl into the bed, and it would be a routine. Hands, elbows, knees, feet, all haphazardly crawling over me. One night around 2 in the morning, I felt her, but this time not crawling into bed, but out. I felt her tug my shirt, pulling me to the side to crawl out the door. I don't know how and why the change in the direction woke me up, but it gave me an uneasy feeling. I rolled over to grab her so she wouldn't fall off the bed. I murmured something like, "Kiddo, do you need to go to the bathroom?" But as I turned to grab her, I felt nothing. My arms folded into each other, and my eyes were shot open, thinking she tumbled off the bed. As I sat up, I saw her standing in the doorway, but it wasn't her. I can still remember the face. It was close to my daughter's age and had a slight smirk, innocent and playful. She wore a yellow sundress with white flowers. She was burned into my memory, but not in a frightening way. I turned to look at where my daughter was, and she was passed out cold, snoring on the other side. When I snapped my head back to where the little girl was standing, she was gone.